Today's lecture is on the rise of the new religious order. In the 1200s, a new version of monasticism developed that was based on a desire to serve common people directly. Instead of enclosing themselves in monasteries, these monks traveled to towns, working with the poor in the neighborhood, helping the sick in their homes, building schools in local parishes, and preaching in the local churches. These groups of active monks, called friars, became very popular because of their humble cheerfulness and simple, pious life. Saint Francis of Assisi, the most famous friar, was born Francis Bernardone in the Italian city of Assisi in the year 1181. His father was a rich merchant, so as a boy Francis was free to play as he liked, and as a teenager he was interested only in parties and having fun. Eventually he chose to amuse himself by going to war, where he was injured in battle and barely survived. While injured, Francis's thoughts turned to God, and by the time he recovered, Francis emerged an entirely new person. He was troubled by the plight of the poor in Italy and wanted to be able to help them. His father, among others, thought that Francis was crazy to want to help people with leprosy, those whom no one else would touch, and give away his money. Francis wanted to serve God. He believed that one day, while he was praying in an old church, God had spoken to him, saying, "Francis, repair my church." In order to obtain money to repair the church, Francis sold some of his father's fine cloth. His father was infuriated and demanded that Francis be put on trial as a thief. The Bishop of Assisi determined that Francis had obtained the money by stealing and therefore needed to give it back to his father. Francis decided not only to give back the money, but to do more. Minutes later he returned to the scene naked. Francis not only gave his father the money, but he also handed over his clothes, signifying that he was giving up his wealth in order to serve God. To his father's horror, Francis donned the rags of a beggar and wandered from town to town, preaching and caring for the poor and the sick. By the year 1209, so many young men had joined St. Francis in his work that he founded a new order of monks called the Franciscans, or Little Brothers of the Poor. Franciscan friars dedicated themselves to helping the poorest people in society. They lived in complete poverty and had to beg or work for food. St. Francis believed that God existed in all parts of nature. As a result, Francis preached that all living things should be praised and treated with respect. In a hymn called the Canticle of the Sun, St. Francis wrote, "Praised be my Lord God with all his creatures, and especially our brother the sun, who brings us the day and who brings us the light." St. Francis was so popular and successful that he also founded an order of nuns called the Little Sisters of the Poor, which was headed by St. Clare of Assisi. In the year 1220, a Spaniard named St. Dominic founded another important order of friars called the Dominicans. Dominicans believed that the best way to help Christians was to educate them. Dominicans built and staffed schools to teach common people. If the people were educated, the Dominicans believed, then they could be better Christians, because they could more fully understand their religion. In the 1100s, the Church increased its role in education by founding universities. The universities grew out of schools connected to famous monasteries and cathedrals. These medieval universities were not like today's schools. Teachers had to be members of the clergy. There were few formal classrooms, so classes often met in cold, dark rooms. Books were scarce, so students had to listen carefully to teachers' lectures, writing down whole chapters that the teacher read from ancient texts. Students studied the 7 liberal arts: Latin, grammar, rhetoric, logic, geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music. Initially, academic training was aimed at students who wanted to become priests or monks, but in time, universities were opened for all students.
During the early Middle Ages, any type of higher education was usually only available in monasteries and cathedral schools, where Christian monks and nuns taught each other and preserved the writings of classical authors. By the 11th century, medieval Europe was becoming more urban and complex, and royal governments needed highly trained men to run their bureaucracies. Students and teachers were also demanding better ways to be educated, and the solution to this came about with the creation of universities. Universities come from the Latin word universitas, which means guild, and these schools were essentially groups of students and teachers who got together into their own groups for the purposes of learning. In some universities, it was the students themselves who paid the teachers and ran the institution. The main curriculum was based on 7 areas: grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, music, geometry, and astronomy, all of which were important for a cleric in the Catholic Church. In some universities, other subjects were also important. That is, Salerno was renowned as a place to study medicine, and Bologna was known for law.